the prison of your own mind. You ever lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, your body begging for rest, but your mind? It just won't shut up. You replay conversations. You question decisions. You imagine futures that haven't even happened yet, and somehow they all go wrong. That's not just thinking. That's mental warfare. And the battlefield is your own head. Overthinking isn't harmless. It's not just how I am. It's a psychological addiction, a cycle your brain creates to give you the illusion of control. You tell yourself, if I just think a little more, I'll find the answer. But the truth is, the more you think, the less you feel alive. Because overthinking doesn't solve pain. It feeds it. Think about it. Your mind starts to replay every mistake you've ever made, every word you regret saying, every chance you didn't take. And you start believing that maybe if you'd done one thing differently, everything would have been okay. That's the trap. Your mind convinces you that peace is found in the past, when in reality, it's what's holding you hostage. Here's the dark truth no one tells you. Overthinking is fear wearing a disguise. It's your brain saying, if I analyze everything, maybe I won't get hurt again. But that's a lie. Because thinking doesn't stop pain. It delays it. The overthinker doesn't lack intelligence. They lack safety. They've been through chaos before, and now their brain believes that staying alert is the only way to survive. So they replay and replay and replay, trying to prevent what already happened. It's not madness. It's trauma disguised as logic. You see, the mind's greatest illusion is the idea that control equals peace. But peace isn't control. Peace is surrender. And surrender terrifies the overthinker, because somewhere deep down, they learn that letting go means getting hurt. So they hold tighter. They analyze every word, every silence, every emotion, until nothing feels real anymore. They become prisoners in a cage made of their own thoughts. And the worst part, they built the lock themselves. But what if I told you, overthinking isn't the problem, it's the symptom? What if it's your mind's way of screaming for safety, for healing, for understanding? Because your thoughts aren't attacking you. They're trying to protect you. They just don't know how to stop. So if you've ever felt trapped inside your own head, if you've ever been haunted by your thoughts, you're not broken. You're just tired of fighting a battle. Your brain was never meant to win alone. This is the dark psychology behind overthinking. Why it happens, why it hurts, and how to finally break free. Because the moment you understand your mind, it stops controlling you. The mind's war zone. How overthinking begins. There's a storm that doesn't make a sound, a war that doesn't spill blood, and a prison that doesn't need walls. It lives inside your head. It feeds on your thoughts. And its name is overthinking. You've felt it before. That endless spiral where one small thought turns into a hurricane. A simple, what if, becomes 100, maybe I should have. And before you know it, you're not living. You're just surviving your own mind. The most dangerous wars aren't fought outside. They're fought inside the mind, quietly, endlessly, mercilessly. And the craziest part? The enemy looks just like you. Psychologists call it cognitive looping. Dark psychology calls it mental entrapment. You call it just thinking too much, but it's more than that. It's your brain's way of trying to protect you, while secretly destroying your peace. See, overthinking doesn't start loud. It starts innocent, a single doubt, a single replay of what you could have said differently. Then it grows, like a whisper turning into thunder. You start replaying conversations, scanning every tone, every pause. You overanalyze texts like they're sacred scripts. You try to predict the future because your brain hates uncertainty more than it loves peace. And in your mind, control equals safety. So you keep thinking, you keep analyzing, you keep spinning, until thinking stops being a tool and becomes a trap. Dark psychology teaches that the mind has two layers: the conscious, where logic lives, and the subconscious, where fear hides. Overthinking is the bridge between the two. It's your fear disguised as logic. It sounds reasonable, but it's emotional chaos in a suit and tie. When someone doesn't reply, logic says, maybe they're busy. Fear says, maybe they're done with me. And your brain chooses fear because fear feels more urgent. That's why overthinkers are exhausted, not from what's happening, but from what might happen. You wake up tired, not because you worked too hard, but because your mind never stopped working. Here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Overthinking gives you the illusion of control. It makes you feel like you're doing something, preparing, predicting, protecting. But it's a lie. You're not controlling the storm. You're fueling it. And the more you think, the more you lose touch with the present. You stop living now and start existing in what if. That's the first stage of mental imprisonment, when your brain becomes both your guardian and your captor. But here's where it gets darker. The mind doesn't overthink randomly. It does it for a reason, a purpose hidden deep in your past. And to understand that, we have to go back to where it all started. The science of overthinking. How your brain traps you in endless loops. You ever wonder why your brain refuses to shut up? Even when you're exhausted? Even when you beg it to stop? It's not because you're broken. It's because your brain thinks it's protecting you. See, deep inside your head, there's a small region called the amygdala, your fear center. It's been around since humans first walked the earth. Its job is simple: detect danger and keep you alive. But in today's world, your dangers aren't lions or cliffs. They're thoughts. Regret, rejection, embarrassment, moments that made you feel unsafe. And the amygdala doesn't know the difference. To your brain, a bad memory feels just as real as a threat in front of you. So every time you start thinking about that argument, that failure, that thing you wish you'd said, your brain hits the panic button. It floods your body with cortisol, the stress hormone. And now you're wired. You can't relax. You can't focus. You start looping. That's the overthinking cycle, a chemical trap. Your mind says, let's solve it. Your body says, we're in danger. And you get stuck between thought and fear, a war between logic and survival. The more you overthink, the stronger those neural pathways become. Your brain literally rewires itself to repeat the same mental loops because repetition feels safe. It's called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to adapt. But here's the dark side. If you keep feeding it fear, fear becomes your comfort zone. You start confusing chaos for safety. And peace? It feels uncomfortable. You don't trust it anymore. That's why silence scares an overthinker. Because when it's quiet, their thoughts get louder. And when their thoughts get louder, they start believing them. Your brain is like a computer running too many tabs. Every what if is another open window. Every regret is another process draining your energy. You keep trying to close them all, but one thought leads to another, and before you know it, your system crashes. And here's the haunting part. Your brain gets addicted to this chaos. It starts craving that stress chemical, just like an addict craves a hit. So even when nothing's wrong, it looks for something to worry about, because worry has become your normal. But remember this, your brain isn't your enemy. It's just overtrained in the art of survival. You taught it that thinking equals safety. So now it refuses to stop thinking, even when it hurts you. The key isn't to fight your brain, it's to retrain it. To show it that peace doesn't mean danger. That quiet doesn't mean loss. That stillness doesn't mean weakness. Because once your brain learns that peace is safe, overthinking starts to fade. Not because you forced it to stop, but because it no longer feels necessary. That's the science of overthinking. A survival mechanism turned self-destruction. The emotional triggers, why your mind won't let go. You ever notice how it's never the big things that break you? It's the small ones. A word, a look, a text left on read. And suddenly, your chest feels tight, your thoughts start racing, and you're back in a place you thought you'd already healed from. That's the thing about overthinking. It's never really about what's happening now. It's about what already happened and what your heart never got closure from. See, emotions don't just disappear. When you don't process them, they stay in your body, waiting for a trigger. Maybe someone ignored your message today, and it hurt more than it should have. Not because of the message, but because your brain connected it to every moment in your past where you felt unimportant. That's emotional memory, your mind's way of reliving old wounds through new experiences. So when you overthink, you're not just analyzing the present, you're protecting your younger self from getting hurt again. Here's where it gets darker. When you experience emotional pain, your brain releases the same chemicals as when you're physically hurt. That means rejection, loss, or betrayal activates the same pain centers as a burn or a cut. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It only knows pain. And overthinking becomes your defense mechanism, your way of saying, maybe if I think hard enough, I'll never feel this again. But that's the trap. Because the more you think, the more you feel. And the more you feel, the more you think. A perfect storm. A cycle of pain disguised as logic. You can't outthink emotion. You can only outfeel it. But most people don't know how. So they suppress it. They distract themselves. They stay busy. And at night, when it's quiet, the thoughts come back, louder than before. Because silence exposes what noise hides. And in that silence, your unhealed parts start whispering, "Remember me?" That's what triggers really are, echoes of unfinished emotions. Your mind isn't trying to punish you. It's trying to finish what your heart started. But here's the power shift. The moment you feel what you've been avoiding, the thought loses its control. Because the emotion finally gets seen. And once it's seen, it doesn't need to scream anymore. That's why true healing isn't about ignoring your thoughts. It's about listening to what they're trying to protect. Sometimes, the loudest noise in your head is just your heart asking for attention. So the next time your thoughts spiral, pause. Ask yourself, what emotion am I avoiding right now? Because maybe you're not overthinking, you're underfeeling. And the moment you stop running from your emotions, your mind finally stops running too. The illusion of control, how overthinking masquerades as intelligence. You ever notice how the smartest people often suffer the most inside their own heads? They analyze everything. They see every angle, every risk, every possible outcome, and still can't make a move. That's not intelligence. That's fear disguised as logic. The truth is, overthinking often feels smart. It makes you feel like you're being cautious, like you're staying one step ahead. But deep down, it's just fear wearing a suit and tie. Your brain tells you, if I just think this through one more time, I'll make the perfect decision. But that one more time never ends. You analyze, you predict, you prepare for every scenario, except the one where you actually live. See, overthinking is seductive. It gives you the illusion of control in a world that often feels uncontrollable. It whispers, if I can just figure out why this happened, I'll finally feel safe. But safety doesn't come from understanding every possibility. It comes from trusting yourself to handle whatever happens. That's the difference between intelligence and anxiety. Intelligence gathers information. Anxiety hoards it. Intelligence analyzes and acts. Anxiety analyzes and stops. The overthinker's mind becomes a cage built out of what-ifs. Every bar is made of self-doubt, and every time you hesitate, you reinforce it. Here's the dark twist. Overthinking gives your ego something to do. It keeps you busy, so you don't have to face the uncomfortable truth that some things are simply beyond your control. So you keep thinking, not because it's helping, but because it's distracting you from feeling powerless. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control life, the more out of control you feel. Because life doesn't bend to thoughts, it bends to action. And the overthinker forgets that. They live in their head so long, they forget the world exists beyond it. Psychologists call this the control fallacy, the belief that you can predict and manage everything. It's comforting, but it's false. You can't think your way into peace. You have to feel your way there. Peace comes from acceptance, not analysis. From courage, not certainty. When you finally stop needing to control the outcome, you become free to experience it. Maybe that's why the calmest people you know aren't the ones who have all the answers. They're the ones who've made peace with not needing them. Because real power isn't in knowing every path. It's in walking one with confidence, even when the destination is unclear. So next time your mind says, think harder, tell it, no, feel deeper, because wisdom lives in silence, not in endless noise. The cycle of self-doubt, how overthinking destroys confidence. You ever notice how overthinking always starts small? One simple thought. Did I say the right thing? Should I have done that differently? And before you know it, that one question turns into a storm. You start analyzing your every move, every word, every action, every silence. You replay conversations, imagining how people must have perceived you. You start questioning your own worth, even when no one else is. That's the real damage of overthinking. It doesn't just make you anxious. It makes you doubt yourself. The overthinker's mind is like a courtroom, and you're both the accused and the judge. You keep putting yourself on trial for crimes you never committed. You interrogate every decision, search for invisible mistakes, and sentence yourself to guilt, even when there's no evidence. And the verdict is always the same. I'm not enough. But where does that voice come from? Not your intelligence, not your logic. It comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. Every time you let that fear speak, it erodes your confidence, piece by piece, until doubt becomes your default setting. Here's the psychology behind it. When you overthink, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the part that controls reasoning, goes into overdrive. It starts scanning for danger, social danger, emotional danger, even when none exists. And when it finds nothing, it creates something. It builds stories. It imagines judgment. It invents reasons to stay small. You start believing those stories. You start mistaking thoughts for truth. And that's when self-doubt becomes identity. But here's the twist. Confidence isn't the absence of overthinking. It's the ability to move despite it. Confident people overthink too. They just don't stay stuck there. They let the thought come. Then they act anyway. Because they understand something most don't. You can't think your way into confidence. You have to prove it to yourself through action. Every time you act while afraid, you teach your brain that fear isn't fatal. You rewire it. You reclaim trust in yourself. And slowly, the voice of doubt gets quieter. Because confidence isn't built in your mind. It's built in your moments. Every decision you don't overanalyze. Every time you trust your gut. Every time you speak your truth. You rebuild the bridge between who you are and who you believe you can be. So the next time your thoughts start spiraling, remember this. Your brain is just running an old program, a habit of fear, not a reflection of truth. And you're not your thoughts. You're the one who decides which ones to believe. The hidden addiction, why the mind craves overthinking, Let's be honest. You don't want to overthink. No one wakes up and says, "Yeah, let me ruin my peace today by analyzing every possible outcome." And yet, you keep doing it. You replay old conversations. You predict imaginary futures. You analyze emotions that don't even exist. So here's the question. If overthinking feels so painful, why do you keep going back to it? The answer is darker than you think. Overthinking is an addiction. Not in the usual sense, no substance, no chemical high, but a psychological one. It gives your brain something it secretly craves: control. See, your mind hates uncertainty. It would rather live in mental chaos than emotional silence. Because silence feels like surrender, and surrender feels like weakness. So what does your brain do? It keeps thinking, trying to solve problems that don't exist, trying to predict people's reactions, trying to control what's out of its reach. The root cause: how childhood and trauma feed overthinking. Overthinking doesn't start in adulthood. It starts in childhood, quietly, invisibly, when you learn that safety depends on certainty. Maybe you grew up in a home where love had conditions, where peace meant walking on eggshells, where being careful was survival. So you learned early to think before you speak, to predict people's moods, to replay everything you said, just to make sure you didn't upset anyone. That's not being thoughtful. That's trauma disguised as logic. See, as a kid, your brain's number one job wasn't happiness. It was safety. If safety meant being alert, you stayed alert. If safety meant overanalyzing everyone's tone, you did that. If safety meant staying quiet, you learned silence. You didn't grow up overthinking because you're broken. You grew up overthinking because you had to survive. That habit followed you into adulthood, but now it's outdated. Back then, overthinking protected you. Now, it's destroying your peace. Your brain still thinks danger is around the corner, so it keeps scanning for threats that don't exist. It keeps analyzing every message, every silence, every small change in tone, like your safety still depends on it. But the truth is, you're not that helpless kid anymore. You're not living in that chaos. You just haven't updated the program. Here's the psychological truth. Your mind learned to prepare for pain because it experienced inconsistency. So now when something feels good, you don't trust it. When someone loves you, you wait for them to leave. When life feels calm, you start to panic. That's not intuition. That's trauma replaying its old story. And this is where most men get it wrong. They think healing means stop thinking. But no, healing means retraining the mind to feel safe again. You can't outthink trauma. You can only outgrow it. It's not about silencing the mind. It's about teaching it that it doesn't need to stay on guard anymore. That peace isn't danger. That calm isn't emptiness. That love doesn't always end in loss. If you want to heal overthinking, start by reparenting that inner child, the part of you that still flinches at silence, still fears rejection, still believes peace won't last. Tell him, it's okay now. We're safe. We don't need to keep running simulations in our head anymore. You'll be shocked how quickly the noise fades when your mind finally believes it doesn't need to defend you anymore. So the next time you catch yourself spiraling, don't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Ask, "What am I trying to protect?" Because behind every overthinker is a kid who just wanted to feel safe. And once you heal him, the noise turns into peace. The chaos turns into clarity. And the boy becomes a man who no longer fears his own mind. The cycle of self-doubt, how overthinking destroys confidence. You ever notice how overthinking always starts small? One simple thought. Did I say the right thing? Should I have done that differently? And before you know it, that one question turns into a storm. You start analyzing your every move, every word, every action, every silence. You replay conversations, imagining how people must have perceived you. You start questioning your own worth, even when no one else is. That's the real damage of overthinking. It doesn't just make you anxious. It makes you doubt yourself. The overthinker's mind is like a courtroom, and you're both the accused and the judge. You keep putting yourself on trial for crimes you never committed. You interrogate every decision, search for invisible mistakes, and sentence yourself to guilt, even when there's no evidence. And the verdict is always the same: I'm not enough. But where does that voice come from? Not your intelligence, not your logic. It comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being misunderstood. Every time you let that fear speak, it erodes your confidence, piece by piece, until doubt becomes your default setting. Here's the psychology behind it. When you overthink, your brain's prefrontal cortex, the part that controls reasoning, goes into overdrive. It starts scanning for danger, social danger, emotional danger, even when none exists. And when it finds nothing, it creates something. It builds stories. It imagines judgment. It invents reasons to stay small. You start believing those stories. You start mistaking thoughts for truth. And that's when self-doubt becomes identity. But here's the twist. Confidence isn't the absence of overthinking. It's the ability to move despite it. Confident people overthink too. They just don't stay stuck there. They let the thought come. Then they act anyway. Because they understand something most don't. You can't think your way into confidence. You have to prove it to yourself through action. Every time you act while afraid, you teach your brain that fear isn't fatal. You rewire it. You reclaim trust in yourself. And slowly, the voice of doubt gets quieter. Because confidence isn't built in your mind. It's built in your moments. Every decision you don't overanalyze. Every time you trust your gut. Every time you speak your truth. You rebuild the bridge between who you are and who you believe you can be. So the next time your thoughts start spiraling, remember this. Your brain is just running an old program, a habit of fear, not a reflection of truth. And you're not your thoughts. You're the one who decides which ones to believe. Breaking the loop, how to stop overthinking for good. Let's be honest, you've tried to stop overthinking before. You've told yourself, I'll just stop worrying. But 5 minutes later, your brain starts again. A new scenario, a new fear, a new what if, because overthinking doesn't stop when you tell it to. It stops when you retrain your brain to trust silence again. See, your mind is like a wild horse. If you keep trying to control it by pulling harder, it fights back. But if you guide it with calm focus, is this fact or fear? Most thoughts are emotional predictions, not truth. Learn to separate what's real from what's imagined. What's the next small action? Don't focus on the whole mountain, just the next step in front of you. That's how you shrink the storm. Your brain loves loops. It finds safety in repetition, even when that repetition hurts you. That's why you replay old arguments, regret missed chances, and imagine every possible failure, because your mind would rather stay busy than stay present. So instead of saying, stop overthinking, replace the thought with action. Get up, move, breathe, write it down. Do one small thing that breaks the pattern, because motion breaks mental loops. You can't overthink and act at the same time. You want peace? Earn it through presence. Go outside. Feel the wind. Notice your breathing. Every time your mind drifts into chaos, bring it back to what's real, to this moment, right here, right now. That's mindfulness, not fancy meditation, just awareness. Awareness kills anxiety. Because anxiety lives in the future, regret lives in the past. But peace? Peace only lives here, in the present moment. You can't control what happens next week, next month, or next year. But you can control what you do today. And that's enough. So the next time your brain tries to drag you back into the loop, smile and whisper, "Not today." Then act. Even if it's small, even if it's imperfect. Because every time you choose action over analysis, you teach your brain that peace isn't something to chase. It's something you create. Soft closing tone, fade out. You don't break the loop by fighting it. You break it by moving through it. By showing your mind that you're not its slave. You're its master. And a calm mind isn't a gift, it's a skill. One you build, one choice at a time.